Hey there, I'm meteorologist Ian Kowalski for another episode of Weather Eye, and it was a somewhat eventful week here in Grand Junction. We got some light rainfall earlier on, and it really went as fast as it came, unfortunately. Not really this big, widespread, sustained rain that we would like to see. Instead, we warmed right back up. I was out at the JUCO World Series this week, actually, which was a lot of fun. Got some rain on my head, and then by the time we got to the night games around 7 o'clock, it dried out already. There was plenty of sunshine. You couldn't even see on the ground. It was there earlier on. So are we going to be seeing any more rain? Well, actually, Friday we might. Remember, we're recording today on the 28th. So tomorrow, the 29th, might get some light rain on Friday. I'll be showing you that here in a little while. But we also want to talk about this national weather upcoming too, because for once, we actually have some more severe weather in the northwestern corner of the United States. We'll be talking about that and why that is, because if you haven't read the weather headlines recently, we're all getting prepared, as meteorologists at least, for this El Nino. In fact, a super El Nino. We'll be talking about what that means here in a little bit. But first, we're just going to take a look at the national weather and see what's going to be going on here on our satellite and radar. What are the main threats going around the country right now? And it is primarily confined towards the northwestern portion of the United States. What does that actually look like? Well, if you take our SPC Day 1 outlook, you can see it's in that yellow zone here. It's a slight risk, and I'll say it every time. Slight might sound small, but remember, it's over tens of dozens of miles, hundreds of miles at times. And so a small risk over a very large area doesn't mean there's going to be thunderstorms built in there, of course. Our main threats that we're looking at here are going to include hail, potentially large hail at times, but it is on the lower end of the spectrum. You're not seeing this widespread, huge, severe event, but certainly big enough hail where, well, you don't want it landing on your car. You don't want it going through a window or by any means. So something you would definitely have to take caution of if you're, say, over here towards Oregon, down in Bend, and up towards Kennewick in Washington, and a little bit of Idaho in there too. So very, again, pushing over towards the eastern portion of the state, and both more inland portions, Washington, Oregon, and then over towards the west, Idaho. So what's coming up next for them? Well, you're seeing a little bit of rain already starting to pop up here on our satellite and radar, but it's still pushing more towards the center of that zone. And I want you to look at the path of that too. It's going from east to west. That's very interesting. It's going to be important for our forecast here in Grand Junction, actually, because there's a low pressure system over towards the western portion of the United States. That's why they're seeing this rain here on our screen. That's going to be coming our way, too. That's why we're thinking about rain tomorrow as we get into Friday, as well as these strong gusts that you might have already felt here in western Colorado that led to those red flag warnings. So this is really directly linked to us here on the western slope. It just again shows you how dynamic our atmosphere is. So there's not too much rain to talk about right now. We really are in the earlier end of this system. So I haven't seen any big reports of hail or tornadoes, but tornadoes will also be a small threat here. This is only 2% on our scale. Usually you don't see anything too big popping up with those, but that just means it's possible, and you could get some EF0s, maybe an EF1 in there. But again, we don't necessarily want to be higher on that scale either, because that's when you start to get to a more destructive zone. So luckily not too bad there, but wind is, again, a bit more of a threat. You're getting those, again, 60-mile-per-hour gusts and up at times. It's typically what you're seeing with those 15% zones, but of course they get higher locally under those thunderstorms. So this is generally what the threat we're looking at for the national portion of the United States right now. But what is the main ingredients that are kind of going into this? Well, the number one thing is that they're seeing at the upper levels of the atmosphere, you're seeing a bit more wind shear. Wind shear, what's that? It's wind that either is stronger at different layers of the atmosphere or weaker potentially, just a difference between the two really. But of course they do have to be strong or going a different direction. Both of those would qualify as shear both directional and in terms of our actual not only direction it's going, but also the intensity. Now, you'll notice here, we pull up a tool here. You look at your shear rate, your rotation directors, not seeing anything. It's usually not measured for the most part by anything in the upper atmosphere, because our radars only go so high and can only detect so much data at once. What we need is clouds to actually look at what is happening here in the northwestern corner. And right now you're only seeing some minor thunderstorms that are starting to pop up more and more as you move into the next couple of days here. So when you look at our U.S. radar nationally, you're only starting to see that get going. So that's why we're not really seeing a big visual representation of that shear necessarily. Instead, I as a meteorologist have to look more at the micro level, kind of zoom in at what you're seeing on that radar. So that's what we're looking for right now, and have to, again, go specifically to the stations as you move over to Oregon, as you move into western Idaho. Say the radar in Boise, that's about the only place you can look to get a better glimpse at that. These national radars try to condense things a lot more, and we're just not going to have that tool with us right now. So I do want to talk to you a little bit more about that, a little bit under the hood kind of stuff as we move later on into our show here. We'll be talking more about what that weather is actually going to mean locally for us. Again, gusts, rainfall here in western Colorado. Now, I also wanted to talk a little bit about, again, that big weather headline that you've heard throughout the week. It's that El Nino coming and hurricane season 2 right at the same time. We're expecting that El Nino to develop in the range of May through July, so coming up very soon, of course, back into May. We're almost in June by now, but that will be coming on our way. What does that mean? Well, it means a lot of places, especially that are vulnerable to hurricanes, are already making their preparations. And so we have a good look across the country at what's going to be coming. And first, we're going to take a look at Florida, because they had what I found was super interesting, rolling out in one of their counties there, a Manatee County specifically, a new vehicle to help combat, of course, that water, those strong winds that they're going to be seeing, of course, towards the eastern portion of the United States. So we're going to travel to Florida real quick, take a watch this, and then we'll be talking more about the specifics of El Nino and danger preparation here in a little bit. Let's take a look.
Hurricane season just days away. Manatee County is rolling out new ways to respond when a storm hits, like this high water rescue vehicle. Manatee County Public Safety walked us through what happens when the county activates during an emergency. Officials explained how information is coordinated and shared during storms, introducing us to their new real-time data consolidation tool, Peregrine. In the past, all of the information appeared on separate tabs.
Now it's all in one system, so we can see the ebbs and flows of them without having to go to all those different tabs. So it saves time, and again, saving time is life safety.
Officials say because of this tool, Manatee was the first county in the state during the 2024 season to qualify for federal assistance.
If we didn't have this data consolidation, it could take 24 hours minimum to get that information. We were able to do it in about 12 hours.
We also got a demonstration of the county's first ever high water rescue vehicle designed to move through 48 inches of water and reach people trapped in flooded areas.
It gets us into neighborhoods to get people out of their homes quicker. We can get 25 to 30 people on the back of this. In the past, you throw them on the back of a little boat, you get 1 or 2 at a time. We can go in neighborhoods and get them on, get them out quicker.
Chief Brown says in a flooding situation like Hurricane Debbie in 2024, the longer the water sits, there's a higher risk for hazards to appear.
Floating debris, electrical issues, there's a lot of things that happen. So the quicker we get there, get them out of the situation they're in to safety is the best.
Officials want the public to know
if there's an issue, we're coming to get you.
And county leaders say with all this new technology, they are more prepared than ever for this upcoming season. In Manatee County, Cassandra Mishak, 8 on your side.
That was pretty wicked, wasn't it? It was really cool to see that new technology being rolled out to help out people in Florida as we get into hurricane season. I was really happy I found that one. That was a great package. Let's take a look at what El Nino actually means, though, and how is that going to affect our hurricane season, especially for, of course, our friends down towards Florida, over on the West Coast too, that are a lot more vulnerable than we are here in Western Colorado. Although we do tend to get every now and then a low pressure system or tropical remnants coming our direction, come down from the southwestern corner of the United States. So we're not totally unaffected, of course, but the direct impact zones, certainly we are not. Let's take a look at El Nino. This is an image of what happens in the tropics when El Nino starts to get going. We're transitioning towards this again, like I mentioned a moment ago. In the May to July zone is when the estimation is. And we're waiting for right here, this orange zone. It says here, weaker trade winds, warmer weather, temps and higher moisture content. What does that actually mean? Well, it means that the ocean down towards South America is starting to warm up on the West Coast. What's that do? It changes a lot. It changes where the moisture moves, and more specifically, where the jet stream is hanging out throughout the season. And as you know, if you watch a lot of weather, the jet stream is some of those most intense air in the upper atmosphere, and we are entirely dependent upon its location, its ebb, its flow for everything happening down here on the surface. That's why hours and hours are poured into studying it here in the United States, because our weather is entirely dependent upon it. And so less hurricane activity you'll see over there is generally what you're seeing over towards our friends over towards the Pacific, or excuse me, over towards the islands. Go to Cuba, go to Puerto Rico, go to Dominican Republic. Those areas see less hurricanes overall. Now you go towards the West Coast, and this is why it's interesting for us. That's where you generally see more hurricane activity. And you will notice there, less wind shear means more hurricanes. Why is that? Because most of the time, you associate tornadoes and hurricanes with each other, but they actually work basically completely differently. Sure, they have some of those base ingredients that you still need. You need that severe weather, potentially the energy to build up in some ways, but functionally they are very, very different. So why does wind shear hurt hurricane development? And why does El Nino forming move it over towards the west? Well, again, it's changed the position of the jet streams and the trade winds. But on top of that, wind shear is not good for hurricanes because a hurricane works much more closely towards a low pressure system, just a massive column of air going up into the atmosphere. And so when you get wind shear, different directions, different speeds at different layers of the atmosphere, it kind of becomes like a leaning tower of Pisa. Instead of going directly straight up, it starts to ebb and flow, move around a little bit, like you would see with a tornado. It starts to spin, but then it tails off a little bit. But while for a tornado, that could be good, you get that wind shear, you get stronger, more intensity. With this massive system, if you have instability, you need instability in the atmosphere. Instability in a different sense. If you don't have a straight up column of air, actually that causes the system to start to fall apart. So you want less wind shear for more hurricanes. You need a little bit, of course, still in there. But generally speaking, you want it to be a big vertical column of air so it actually builds and absorbs more of the warm or ocean water. And so that's why you're seeing it move over towards the West Coast. And again, that's something that would affect us more, bringing us a little bit more rain as you get tropical remnants that come up towards us in western Colorado and generally speaking, try to ride the Rockies. And so what else does it do? Well, again, you see that jet stream is going up further towards the north than you would see normally because you see the warmer ocean temperatures down the West Coast of the United States. And so as it moves up north, it brings warmer temperatures north with it. So that's why you see above average conditions all along the American-Canadian border up towards our north. And we're generally in that middle zone here in Colorado. It's kind of we can go either way. I know that's never a satisfying answer, but generally speaking, we are kind of in the middle zone. We tend to be around average, maybe a degree or two above. And then you go down towards the south. Well, it's a bit cooler than normal. Why is that? Well, it's just the direction of that jet stream. You see all that moisture traveling down towards the southern portion of the United States. That's, going to carry a little bit cooler air with it at times. And that's why you on average see those below average conditions. However, because the moisture is there, that's also where you get typically wetter conditions during an El Nino all along the southern half of the United States. And generally in Colorado. I know we don't quite see that here on our graphic, but on average, an El Nino is good for rainfall here in Colorado. And so that's what we want to see because we are in desperate need of it. Of course, we've talked about that all year long. And this year in particular is special because it is a super El Nino. I want to pull this last graphic back up here. What is the difference between a super El Nino and a normal El Nino? Well, as a normal El Nino, you're looking at the change in the ocean temperatures of around half a degree, warming up that much. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you, again, take it over this huge scale of the ocean, it is quite impactful, actually. That does mean a whole lot. And especially atmospherically, because you get all that warmer air, all that warmer ocean, means all of that moisture gets picked up into the air on a much higher rate. And so that changes where your moisture actually goes at, depending on where the ocean is most warm. Now, in a super El Nino, it's just that, but of course more dramatic. It's closer towards a 2-degree change on average, sometimes up. And what does that actually mean for us here in the United States? Well, it generally just means that whatever conditions you would see just become a bit more extreme one way or the other. If you would see more rain with an El Nino, well, it's going to be even wetter than normal. If you're a bit drier, it's going to be a bit drier than normal too. So we certainly want to end up on the wet side of that here in Colorado, that is for sure. But yeah, that's basically just the big difference between El Nino and your super El Nino. And again, of course, more severe weather, obviously, that's not necessarily what you want. You want that lighter, sustained rain. You don't really want anything that would cause like flash flooding, for instance. That's why you can see those increased chances of that, because you get those more extreme droughts followed up by that more extreme rainfall. And that's why you get that more hazardous weather conditions generally in the United States when that super El Nino forms. So that's a little more insight to that. But another place that does have typically a stronger reaction towards El Nino is Hawaii, actually, because when you have that El Nino, more of those hurricanes, of course, forming over towards the western portion of the United States. And of course, where's Hawaii at? Well, it's over towards our west, over in the Pacific. So we're going to be taking a look at how they're already getting ready for this hurricane season, and then we're going to bring it back here towards western Colorado, talk about that little bit of rainfall and gusts that I mentioned earlier on in the show. So we're going to go to this pack, we're going to take a brief break, and I'll come right back here to talk more about local weather. See you in a second.
With El Nino conditions warming up, Hawaii could see more than double the amount of storms from a typical year.
The last strong El Nino year that we had, we point back to 2015, which was our record-setting hurricane season. 2015, half of them developed within our basin. So that could lead to very faster onset times, less time to prepare. That's why you need to take this opportunity now. We talk about preparedness. It's a year-round activity. You should always be prepared.
Emergency officials say the biggest lesson from recent disasters like the Kona low storms is that communities need to be ready before a storm.
Have 14 days of supplies, water, and medications when we're in hurricane season, just in case things get tough.
It only takes one storm, one event. Look back on the March Kona low storms and see how much Hawaii was impacted. And I ask you to, like I said, prepare now.
State, county, and military partners recently completed a statewide hurricane exercise to test emergency response plans before the season starts.
We're really asking and encouraging our individuals and our families and our communities to do the same thing, to look at your plans, review them, look at your supplies, as John mentioned, and go into hurricane season prepared.
Residents should have a plan for evacuation, communications, and checking on family and neighbors.
Evacuation decision needs to be made ahead of time, not when the hazards are already present.
HIEMA is also updating shelter and refuge locations statewide, while warning that some buildings may offer limited protection depending on the storm. Nikki Schoenfeld, KHON2 News, working for Hawaii.
Hey, welcome back. I'm meteorologist Ian Kowalski for the second half of this episode of Weather Eye on May the 28th. Almost in June, back half of spring, and it certainly feels like it with 90-degree highs coming outside today for the Grand Valley. It's feeling warming up real quick, but we all got to get used to it here on the Western Slope. If you're new to the area, you will be very familiar with those very hot and dry days as we get into the summer. Let's take a look at our local weather, though. What's changing up over the next couple of days? It's this low pressure system right here. We talked about it in the first half of the show. It's bringing severe weather towards the northwestern corner of the United States. Now, not quite so bad here, the western Colorado, but it is coming our direction. Let's watch it just move on over towards us in the western slope. So the main thing that brings uncertainty with this low pressure is where is it going to hang up on the Rockies? Because from a personal meteorology perspective, I could tell you that there's a little bit of difference between if it stops over towards, say, Steamboat in the northern portion of the Park Range and over further towards our west, it kind of skirts around that. Those are both possibilities on the table. If it stops up towards the Park Range, we're getting a lot more rain here in the Grand Valley, that's for sure. So I'll be watching that very closely, and we'll be talking about what I think is going to happen here in a moment. Spoiler alert, I think it will actually get hung up on the Park Range, and that would make for an overall wetter couple of days, not just as we go into tomorrow on the 29th, but also as we get to next week, too. Overall, expecting above average precipitation. However, I will say my 7-day forecast is generally on the drier end for the valleys here in Colorado. Now, what it's not lacking is winds. Not only today, but tomorrow, we're talking about these red flag warnings. As that low pressure comes close, it runs into that high, that big zone of orange that you saw here in a moment ago on our graphic. 45-mile-per-hour gusts. That's for most of Delta County, most of Montrose County, down to Ridgeway and over into Utah too. What's that mean? Well, 40-mile-per-hour gusts, critical fire weather conditions. No surprises there. We do need a lot more water to not necessarily have these critical conditions. And we do need, of course, our fuels to be a little bit wetter. What's that? Well, that's your shrubs, your bushes, your things that burn really easily. We need to be a bit more moist, a bit less dry. So Mesa County, you'll notice, is still excluded from that. Why is that? Well, we got a little bit more rainfall over the past couple of days. I'd say that's definitely the leading factor for why the National Weather Service chose not to put us in that zone. And in addition to that, our gusts are not going to be quite this strong generally here in the center portion of Mesa County, closer to 30 miles per hour for us. So that's the main difference there. Let's take a look at our little model here as we go in the next couple of hours. Getting down to tonight to around that 70-mile-per-hour zones. Of course, Friday, it's not going to be any different. Again, around 30 miles per hour here in Grand Junction, but it can periodically get a little bit stronger, especially at elevation in Delta and in Montrose County. So do keep that in mind. That's why those red flag warnings were issued for Delta and Montrose, but not necessarily here in Grand Junction. Of course, Glade Park, that's your exception up there. It'll be a little bit windy for you guys along the Uncompahgre. Let's take a look at our futurecast. How's that rainfall actually going to pan out? Well, to get later on into tonight, of course, still hanging out in the 70s. And Friday morning is a very, very, very small chance of some light rain. But I don't think our dew points really jump up enough for it to really be anything measurable until you get to Friday night. So you see those highs jump up all the way again into those low to mid 80s by the time you're in the early afternoon. No surprises there. It's not going anywhere. But you do see, of course, this southerly flow from that low pressure system and then the scattered rainfall all across western Colorado. Potential for an isolated thunderstorm to pop up in there too. So just keep that in mind. There is those chances of rain, but I primarily have it. You'll notice that they start to clump up a little bit more, become bigger as you get towards nighttime. I don't really see much rainfall happening in the valleys during the day. Really, I think we're going to have to wait for nightfall to get that, again, small chance of rainfall here in the valleys across the western slope. So we'll be watching that here in the studio, of course. But that is a prediction right now. I think we get a very light amount of rain as we get into Friday night. And Saturday, this is the morning, you start to cool down a little bit, kind of only get into those 70s. In fact, I have a degree or two cooler generally than this for tomorrow because that low brought us some cooler air, generally knocked high pressure out of our area. Isolated elevation thunderstorms, but that's not getting into the valleys by any means. Maybe for hiking all the way up on the peaks of the Uncompahgre, you might get something. Here's Sunday, too. A lot of models like to get something going this day. I really just don't see it happening in any big way in the valleys. I think those are mostly going to be confined to the mountains. I don't think that system's bringing us, again, enough moisture in the valleys, enough high dew points for it to be anything other than Virga. So do just keep that in mind. Our real rainfall chances are going to be possible as you get into Friday night. And by the time you get to Monday, of course, you warm right back up. I have low 90s by the time you get to Wednesday and Thursday of next week. Here is our futurecast regionally. You can see it's all on the front range too. There's no surprise there. Anything that's heading west to east, generally they get right after we do. And we'll dry out briefly, but then Friday you see that low pressure, of course, move to the area. You can even see that rotation associated with it, generally going that counterclockwise direction. You dry out briefly once you hit that Saturday, and then you start to see isolated rain pop up across our region. You see that second system as you get on the back end of that. Generally speaking, it's just going to bring another front with us. And then starts to clear a little bit more, drying out as we get into next week. And nationally, you can see over in the top corner of the screen above me, you can see those thunderstorms ongoing because of that low along the west coast. And they clear out by the time you get to Friday night. And then it comes on over towards us in the western and intermountain portion of the United States. And then going on over towards the east, get that extra boost of moisture for our friends over in the south and the Midwest as you get into next week. So overall, it's not really the craziest week for in terms of severe weather. Certainly some thunderstorms built in there, and there's definitely places that could get a little bit of flooding over towards the northeast. But really, it's going to be an okay week of weather. Here's a time lapse too. This was from yesterday, actually. No, I'm sorry. This was from the 26th. It was from 2 days ago. Here is on that day we did get some light rain. Here's a beautiful little time lapse of our clouds earlier on today. And you can see a rainbow built in there too. So I think we picked a pretty good one here in western Colorado to show you as we close out our show here over the next couple of minutes. So here is our time lapse here in Grand Junction. Very beautiful to see. I almost want to upload these online. We should make a little compendium of them. But that is, for the most part, our show. We are expecting, again, a little bit of rain here as we move into Friday night. But it's going to be a little bit more than what you're seeing on our time lapse here behind me. Do keep that in mind. But still nothing too crazy. Man, that's gorgeous, too. This is a perfect one that we got. But we are, again, expecting that rain to start Friday night at elevation. Could be Friday tomorrow during the day. And then we're going to cool down on Saturday, which is good for me because I'm running in Mike the Headless Chicken Festival. And so I want it to be... I had a fake sneeze there. My a little bit of drama on the back end of this episode of Weather Eye, but I did not sneeze. But point is, we are going to see a cool down on Saturday, kind of getting into the mid 70s here in Grand Junction. Good for Mike the Headless Chicken Festival. Again, I'm running in there. I'll be very happy to not quite be sweating as bad as I did today because we're in the low 90s outside, if you can believe it. But of course, it's only a week or two ahead of schedule. We'll be seeing that, of course, again, by the time we get to the end of June. And that is pretty much our forecast because you dry out a lot after that. There's not too much to see as we get into the middle of next week. It really is just looking dry, and then a return to those 90s as we gradually warm back up and get out of average range to above average range. So if you like this episode, do feel free to send me an email. Say you see a little bit of that rain tomorrow. Maybe you catch a rainbow yourself. Do send it to me, and I'll be happily featuring it on this show. Or maybe you can make your own time lapse from a camera in your front yard. I don't know. I'd certainly be happy to feature here and credit you. And on top of that, if you have any weather questions you would like to be answered on this show, I'd be happy to talk about them here because I like talking about the science behind the weather too, not just necessarily the forecast. But I'm happy you could join me for this episode of Weather Eye. For me personally, I've been watching some JUCO over these past few days, and so I'm hoping to catch another game or two by the time we get to the end of the week. But I'll be wearing sunscreen, my big poofy hat, bringing some water with me just to avoid this heat. Again, it won't be too bad on Saturday, so I'm looking forward to that too. So thank you for watching this episode. I've been meteorologist Ian Kowalski, and we'll see you next week.